Hey everyone! So, I just turned 15 3 days ago, and let me tell you, my grandma gave me the most amazing birthday gift ever. She transferred the ownership of her penthouse apartment to me. Grandma doesn't live there. She has a house in the suburbs and only uses the penthouse when she wants to be closer to the city. I'm over the moon about it. The past year and a half have been super rough for me. First, my dad just up and left us. He had always been a workaholic and didn't spend much time with us, but his leaving was still a huge shock. My mom didn't even tell me he was leaving until after he had already moved out. By then, they had already filed for divorce. Apparently, my dad was overwhelmed, but he never explained what was going on. He didn't even say goodbye in person, just sent me a text telling me to be good. After that, he disappeared from my life. My mom got the house and full custody of my brother and me. My dad has visiting rights but hasn't used them once, so I have no idea what's up with him. As if that wasn't enough, about 2 months ago, my mom sat me down and dropped another bombshell. She had been dating this guy, let's call him Robert, for almost 3 months, and they were in love and got engaged. I barely had time to process that she was even seeing someone new before she announced they were getting married. It was a lot to take in, and I wasn't thrilled because 5 months seems way too short to know someone before getting engaged. She introduced me to him, and he was super aloof with me, but really playful with my little brother, who's only 4. I thought it was just because my brother is young and easier to interact with. But then, a couple of weeks later, my mom hit me with some news that changed everything. She told me that Robert got a great job offer out of state, and they planned to move, leaving me with my grandma because they thought I wouldn't want to leave my school and friends. I told her I'd rather move with them because I didn't want to lose both my parents. That's when she let it slip that Robert only wanted my brother to come along because he was young enough to form a bond with, but I was too old and would never really be his daughter. Plus, he wasn't happy that I thought their engagement was too rushed. My mom agreed with him and wanted me to stay back. That really hurt because I thought she would be on my side. Feeling betrayed, I decided to move in with my grandma right away. While it took a few days to arrange the move, I barely spoke to my mom in that time and didn't even say goodbye when I left. The only person I said goodbye to was my little brother, because I was definitely going to miss him. Since moving in with my grandma, she has been super supportive and loving. Life here is pretty great, except for the longer commute to school. Grandma also thinks what my mom did was terrible. 3 days ago, we celebrated my birthday, and my grandma threw me a little party. She invited some of my friends, and it was really nice. She's been so kind and caring, and I'm really grateful for her. So, a couple of my close friends from school kind of ambushed me by stalking me on Facebook, along with some hand-picked relatives. It was a huge surprise. I'd been feeling pretty down after my mom dropped me off here, so it really cheered me up. After we cut the cake, my grandmother had this major announcement. She's giving me a piece of property. For now, her lawyer's controlling it, but once I hit 18, it's all mine. Best news ever. I wasn't planning to tell my mom, but turns out someone at the party spilled the beans to her. My mom called me last evening, all excited. She said she heard about the property from Grandma and talked with Robert. They had this crazy plan that Robert would adopt me if I convinced Grandma to transfer the property to him. She actually thought I'd be thrilled about this, because it meant I could live with them. But nope, I was anything but happy. I told her flat out that I wasn't doing that and hung up. She called back, but I ignored it. Then she texted me this long message, explaining her side. She was like, "Sorry if you're hurt, but Robert's been a big help after your dad and I split. He's been there for me emotionally and financially. Your dad hasn't been very generous with the alimony and child support. Our lifestyle didn't come cheap, and I've had to work extra shifts just to stay afloat." Robert was the one who stepped in, and although he hasn't always been nice to you, it's because of his past issues with kids from previous relationships. I left you with Grandma because I knew she'd take great care of you. It's not like I abandoned you. I just hoped you'd understand and come with us if you persuaded Grandma about the property. Even your brother misses you. Please consider it for my happiness. I love you. At first, the message made me pause, but then I just got more annoyed. She thought I should do whatever Robert said just because she did. It felt so entitled and weak. I replied after a while, saying I wouldn't do it and she could go with Robert without me. I told Grandma about it, and she said there's no way she's transferring the property to Robert. She barely knows him and doesn't trust him. He'd probably just sell the place, and I'd be left with nothing. So I felt relieved that I didn't give in to my mom's proposal. But she wasn't giving up. She showed up at Grandma's place this morning with my brother, trying to talk to me in person. Luckily, I was at school when she arrived. When I got home, Grandma filled me in. I told Mom I hadn't ignored her message. I'd been very clear. I wasn't going to convince Grandma to transfer the property to Robert because we don't trust him. She started crying, saying she was just trying to make everyone happy. That really ticked me off because I've been treated like crap by both my parents, and yet she thought she was the one suffering. I told her to knock it off and said she had it all wrong. Hey everyone! So, she was all about making herself happy and expected everyone to bend over backward for her. Maybe others were okay with that, but not me. I had my own life to live, and I wasn't about to mess it up by constantly running after her to make sure she was okay. That really threw her off, and soon enough, she bailed. Later on, I found out she blocked me, and now I kind of feel guilty about what I said. So I'm thinking of asking Ida for some advice about calling my mom selfish and saying she only cared about her own happiness. Update 1. Hey guys, so first off, thanks to everyone who commented on my original post. It was a real eye-opener. And yeah, there were a lot of things I didn't consider before. It hadn't even crossed my mind that my mom might have been with Robert even before the divorce. Maybe she's just telling us now because it's more convenient since the divorce is final. Honestly, I never imagined my mom would cheat, but now I'm not so sure. She could be for all I know. Anyway, it's kind of out of my hands now, because she made it clear she doesn't want anything to do with me. The one tough part is that I can't talk to my brother anymore, and I really miss him. We've always been super close, and it's hard to think he could be Robert's kid, like some of you suggested. I'm trying not to dwell on it, but now that it's out there, it's hard to ignore. I really want to know the truth, but I'm scared. I've talked a lot about this with my grandma over the past few days, and while we haven't figured out what's true, it's hard to look at my mom the same way. I feel like talking to my dad might give us more insight, but I'm not even sure he'd want to discuss it. It's been 4 days since my mom last visited us, and we haven't heard from her since. At first, she blocked me, and later my grandma told me she got blocked too. It feels pretty ungrateful if you ask me, especially since my grandma has been looking after me without asking for any child support from my mom. My grandma is doing this out of pure kindness and love, even giving up her retirement relaxation to take care of me. My mom should appreciate that, but instead, she blocked her. There's a lot I'm mad at my mom about, and tons of questions I still don't have answers to. I just hope everything comes out in the open eventually. Update 2. Hey everyone, this one's a bit long. So tonight my dad showed up. Turns out my grandma had contacted him but didn't tell me because she didn't want to get my hopes up. He came as soon as he found out my mom was engaged to Robert. There were a lot of revelations, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around them, but I'll try to break it down here. I was shocked to see him, even more so when he hugged me and apologized for everything. He sat us down and started telling my grandma and me everything he knew. He said he and my mom had started falling out of love a long time ago, but stayed together for my sake, to avoid putting me through a breakup. About 3 years ago, he started an affair with a coworker. He wanted to tell my mom but didn't have the guts. Eventually, she found out a year ago and filed for divorce. She agreed to keep quiet about his affair if he met all her conditions, leaving the house to her, giving her full custody, paying a huge settlement, alimony, and child support, and staying away from us until she was okay with it. He agreed to all of it just so she wouldn't tell me about his affair, because he didn't want me to hate him. So far, she kept her end of the deal, but it meant he couldn't see me. He also apologized for being a workaholic and not building a stronger bond with me, but in his defense, my mom always wanted more, and he was working non-stop to afford the lifestyle she wanted. He admitted it's not an excuse, but wanted me to know it wasn't entirely his fault. I get it, sort of, but it's still hard to accept. Anyway, the reason he broke his promise to my mom and visited without her okay was that my grandma mentioned Robert in her message and wanted to see if my dad knew him. He rushed over because not only did he know Robert, but he also knew what kind of person he was and wanted to warn us. So get this. Apparently, my mom, dad, and this guy Robert were all part of the same crew back in college. My parents were together, but Robert had this massive crush on my mom. On the night before graduation, they all went out drinking, and Robert decided it was the perfect moment to spill his guts about his feelings to my mom. Of course, she was with my dad at the time, so she turned him down. But she didn't tell my dad about it until 2 weeks later, saying she was confused about her feelings. They ended up taking a break that lasted almost 2 months. During that time, my mom went on a date with Robert, but it was a total disaster, so she went back to my dad. When my mom and dad patched things up, Dad laid down the law. No more talking to Robert because it made him uncomfortable. My mom agreed, but later that year, Dad found out she hadn't cut Robert off. That led to a massive fight, and they almost broke up. Then, Robert actually showed up at Dad's place, and they ended up in a physical fight. Robert thought this would somehow impress my mom, but she just got mad at him for being violent. That was the final straw. Mom finally cut him off. Dad always said Robert was unhinged and bad news. Robert moved away after college, and no one heard from him for years. But Dad thinks Mom and Robert reconnected a couple of years ago because she mentioned hearing from some friends that he was back in town. Dad wasn't sure when Mom started talking to Robert again, but if they were engaged, that definitely meant she was cheating, and all the conditions she set were out the window. Dad told me he was going to confront Mom, but before he did, I wanted to talk to her and get to the bottom of things. He promised to wait until I had my chat with her. I'm still trying to wrap my head around all this, because it's super messy and I don't know who to believe. Neither of my parents has been great to me, so it's all just really complicated. Update 3. So, I finally spoke to my mom. I didn't tell her about my meeting with Dad. I wanted to see what she had to say on her own. She had blocked me, so I had to show up at her place unannounced. Dad had visited me 3 days ago, and yesterday I got the courage to talk to my mom. She seemed surprised to see me, but still invited me in. Luckily, Robert wasn't home, so I could talk freely. I apologized to her at first, just to get her to open up. I pretended that I was having a hard time accepting Robert into the family so soon after the divorce. Then I hinted that it seemed awfully convenient for her to meet someone like Robert, right after splitting up with Dad. I was hoping she'd come clean about knowing Robert from college, but she didn't. She just said she was lucky to have found him. That was a red flag for me, because Dad had showed me pictures, proving they were all friends back then. When Mom lied about not knowing Robert, I knew who to trust. Then she made it worse for herself by saying she had rushed into the engagement with Robert to erase all traces of Dad from her life. She even told me about Dad's affair, which she had promised to never let me know about. At that point, there was no reason to stick around, so I told her I'd see her later and left. As soon as I was out, I called Dad and told him he could do whatever he wanted because I knew he was telling the truth. So now, karma's about to catch up with Mom. I'm not saying Dad's a saint, but he's definitely not as bad as Mom in this mess. Update 4. Hey everyone, lots to catch you up on. First off, everyone was worried if my brother was actually my dad's kid. Well, after Dad confronted Mom, they did a paternity test. And thankfully, my brother is Dad's kid. Dad's now fighting for full custody. Since I'm 15, I can say I want to live with him, which they have to consider. For now, I'm staying with my grandma because even though Dad's trying to fix things, there's still a lot to work on. I feel safest with her. Mom was furious when she found out my visit was just to dig up the truth about her and Robert. She unblocked me once just to curse me out and then blocked me again. We haven't talked since. And Robert? He dumped her as quickly as he got engaged. Turns out he'd been lying to her the whole time. There was no job offer. His plan was to join his uncle's struggling business and use Mom's money to fund it. That's also why he wanted Mom to convince me to transfer the property Grandma gifted me to him. They'd been together for 2 years, and he was stringing her along the whole time. So, in the end, Mom got totally screwed over. Instead of being ashamed, she's been bad-mouthing Robert to all her friends, who've been gossiping about her. That's how Dad and I found out everything. Honestly,
I'm relieved Mom wants nothing to do with me now because I'd hate to be stuck with her. Dad and I have decided to work on our relationship. He's promised to be a better father, and once he gets full or shared custody of my brother, we're going to try to be a happy family. I'm not sure about the functional part, but we can at least try to be happy.